My booktube channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up for you guys. I literally cannot believe September is already over. I did manage to read 7 books in September, which is fantastic considering I had so much going on like school-wise, but I still managed to find some time to read some books that I actually really love. I mean, there are a couple that did not hit quite the same way, but for the most part I really liked everything that I've read this month. Audiobooks have really been coming through for me this month as well because I take the bus every day to get to campus, so I have ample time where I have nothing to do. So I have a couple of audiobooks that I listened to today. I always listen to my audiobooks through Libby, by the way, which I'm sure you know what Libby is, but like free library book borrowing service kind of thing. We're just gonna get into it. I'm gonna start from the beginning of the month and work towards what I have read most recently. So we're gonna get into it. I really hope you enjoy. So the first book that I read this month was The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I've really been wanting to pick up a book by Grady Hendrix for the longest time. I was originally gonna get My Best Friend's Exorcism, but then I was like, vampire sounds good. I mean, I guess an exorcism would be good too, but like, I'll get to that one at some point. This is just the one that I started with. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really ended up enjoying this, although honestly, I think I will like any story that involves vampires. This book follows our main character, whose name I cannot remember, I don't know. But she's in a book club with a bunch of other Southern housewives. My main qualm with this book is that it's called The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and like they do kind of get together like in the end and do stuff, but for the most part everybody else in the book club thinks the main character is nuts and does not help her, so I feel like the title is a little bit misleading. There's also this character whose name is Mrs. Green, and I really wish that we would have gotten more of her as well. I feel like the main problem in this book was like minorities being targeted by this vampire, so I really wish we could have like heard more from like Mrs. Green, who like this is happening in her neighborhood, like these are her kids that like these things are happening to, so I wish there would have been more of that throughout the book. But overall I still really enjoyed it. There were a couple of like really grotesque moments in this book though, so if you have a problem with cockroaches like I kind of do, you might want to skip a couple of pages towards like the here-ish. Aside from that, it was a really good horror book. I haven't read much in the horror realm aside from Stephen King, so this was a good foray into it. The story was still really captivating. There were some really tense moments in this. I think it's very gripping. I literally could not stop reading this, so if you want a good creepy vampire story, might I recommend this? The whole time I was reading this book, I was just reminded of Salem's Lot by Stephen King, and if you know me at all, this is actually one of my favorite books. So it was really fun, like small town atmosphere. I just love that. I eat that shit up. So this is really, really a good read. Also, sorry if the lighting's like a little funky right now. The sun just decided to show up. So moving on to my next book of the month, which is actually my favorite book that I read this month. I cannot believe I've never read this before. I really like this author, so I thought it was high time to pick up this book. I think it's like a children's, not a classic because it's like released pretty recently, but like it won the Newbery medal, so that means something, and that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This book, oh my god, I loved this book so much. Also, I'm kind of a dumb bitch because I didn't realize until the very end of this book that it was a retelling of The Jungle Book. That honestly makes it like 10 times better because I mean, I love the Disney adaptation. I haven't read The Jungle Book, like actually by Rudyard Kipling, but I do plan to do that at some point in my life, but I still really enjoyed this book. So basically this follows Bod Owens. His name is Nobody, but his nickname is Bod, and I just think that's really funny to start out with. His parents get murdered within like the first couple pages of this book, so then he ends up going to live in a graveyard where he is protected by all of these ghosts in this like, I don't really still know what he is, but what is his name? His name is, God, what is his name? Styles? No. Silas, not Styles. This was the perfect fall read. Like, I know so many people love this book, but it's for a good reason. I literally cried while I was reading this book. Like, a lot of the times when I read a sad book, I was like, oh my god, I was like crying. But like, not actually, I was just really sad, but like, tears were coming out of my eyes when I was reading the very end of this book. I don't know what it was, but it really got me. And this is like the first book that's ever like actually made me cry, so I feel like this holds a special place in my heart now. I just love the story so much. It's very like episodic in the way that it is told. Like each chapter is kind of like a different point in Bod's life, and I really liked following him in that fashion. Yeah, it just follows Bod from the time that he is a child growing up in the graveyard to when he inevitably has to leave the graveyard and enter the real world, and it was just so good. Next up, we get into a couple of the audiobooks that I read this month, and I really enjoyed both of the next two that I'm about to talk about. So first up, we have Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This follows like, oh god, what is her name? I cannot remember main characters' names to save my life. I think her name is Maria, and then it eventually follows her daughter Faith, and they're witches growing up in like the 16th and 17th century, I think. At one point throughout the book, they end up moving to Salem, so you can kind of see like the Salem witch trial hysteria kind of thing working its way in there, and watching the repercussions, like if you were actually a witch in that time. I also learned in this book that abracadabra is Hebrew for, what is it? I create as I speak, which I had no clue that's what that meant. And when I heard that, I was like, that's fascinating. Like, I don't even know why, but I was just like, wow, what a piece of knowledge. But overall, the atmosphere of this book was like a 5 out of 5. It was so good, like perfect read for fall. It was like 90 degrees outside at the beginning of this month, but as I was reading this book, I just felt so cozy. I would really recommend this book. The only reason it's not a 5 out of 5 star is because it is a little bit slow. And like, sometimes I'm into that, and I think it really lent itself well to an audiobook. But honestly, if I was like physically reading this book, I don't know if I could have made it through it. But I think some books are just better suited to audiobooks, because this is like telling the story of somebody's life, and I just think it works so well in like an audible format kind of thing, you know? Again, just really good. The next book I read is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Now, a 3 out of 5 stars isn't a bad thing. Like, I still enjoyed this book. I enjoyed my time reading it. Honestly, there were points in time where I couldn't stop reading it. Like, I really enjoyed this book. Like, it was really good. My problem is with thrillers. I just don't think thrillers are for me, but I keep trying to read them because I like think I'll like them, and the premise of this sounded interesting. So it follows this girl who is like down on her luck. She's an orphan. She has nowhere to go, and then she sees this listing for like an apartment sitter or something. So she gets to this really big fancy hotel in New York, which is called the Bartholomew, which I think is actually a real place. So that's kind of interesting. And they were like, we're actually gonna pay you 12 grand? 12 grand, I think, to just live in this apartment for 3 months. And she's like, this is too good to be true. Kind of weird, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And I was like, okay, girlie, that's a bold move, but honestly can't knock the decision, because if someone offered me 12 grand to stay in a really high upscale apartment, would you say no? I mean, like, I don't think I would. Turns out it is too good to be true. She makes a friend who is also an apartment sitter in this building a little bit later in the book, and then she disappears, and she's like, that's weird, I can't get a hold of her at all, and then it kind of like goes from there. So she finds out like the history of like all these things that have happened to the apartment sitters, and she's naturally scared for her life. My main problem with this book is that, okay, if you guess like the end, like the motive to why these people are doing these things, then I applaud you, because there's no way I ever would have guessed like that's why it was happening. But the thing is, you know who's doing it. It's a pretty easy conclusion to jump to. And another problem I had with this book is that the motive is kind of convoluted. You get like a little red herring towards the end, and at that point I was also like, bleh. And then it like took a turn, and I was like, what the hell? This is so weird. Like this is very unrealistic. And I know like it's a thriller, it's not like that realistic, but like when I heard like everything like finally wrapped up and they're like, this is why this is happening, I was like, no, That's so stupid. It's very interesting, don't get me wrong. I don't know. Thrillers just really don't do it for me. So maybe I just need to like stop trying to read them, but I wanted to give it a try. It wasn't bad, really atmospheric. I liked our main character, even though she was like kind of stupid sometimes, but I can forgive her for that because I'm also kind of stupid sometimes. Okay, so the next book that I read this month is The Mystery of Black Hollow Lane by Julia Noble. I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I am considering bumping it up to a 5 though, to be honest. I really enjoyed this book. It's like dark academia meets like, no, it kind of just is dark academia. There's like a Latin society kind of thing. It's happening in a boarding school. Somebody's father mysteriously disappears and they're trying to figure out why. There's a secret society, and it was just honestly everything. I loved her main character. I thought she was just really fun. I liked the other like side characters too. I don't know, it was just such a good time. I don't think I've ever read like a middle grade kind of dark academia type thing. I'm really excited to read The Secret of the Whitestone Gate, which is the second book in this series, and this is just a really good time. So now we get to the last 2 books that I read this month, and they're both by the same author. And I have some issues with them, which is why I'm gonna talk about them last. The first one I read, this was for my mystery literature class, which I have unfortunately dropped at this moment in time, so you won't have to hear me talk about it again. This is just the last book that I ended up reading before I decided to drop it, so that is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars, but I'm contemplating dropping it because the more I think about it, the more I'm like, meh. I don't know. The problem is with every Agatha Christie book I've read so far, which, I mean, granted, hasn't been a lot, but there's been like 3, and it's still just like meh. Like, I think I'm just gonna stop reading Agatha Christie because there's just a lot of problems with her writing. A lot of it is very racially insensitive, and she relies on stereotypes a lot, and it's kind of like, why would I want to read more of this? Like, I don't know. I know she's like such a beloved mystery author, but most of her stuff I'm just not impressed with, so oopsie. But the ending of this book was interesting, and it was like a quick and easy read, but overall, if I didn't have to read this for class, I wouldn't have finished it probably. Then my professor was like, you know, if you want like a really good Agatha Christie ending, you should read And Then There Were None. So I decided to read this one via audiobook, and I didn't give this one a rating because I don't know what to think about it, honestly. I didn't know the background of like the title of this book and like the nursery rhyme that it was based on before I read it, which is my bad, but it's like very not okay. It really made me think about her writing and realize that there are a lot of problems with it. Yeah, I'm probably just gonna stop trying to read Agatha Christie books. The premise of And Then There Were None is interesting, but like overall, I just didn't really like any of the people that were there. The ending was also a little bit convoluted in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you're having a good fall so far. It's like 93 degrees outside right now, but technically it's fall, so we're rolling with it. And yeah, let me know down below, what did you read this month? Like, what's your favorite book? What's your least favorite book? Whatever you want to talk about today. Subscribe, comment. Also, really wanted to thank you guys for 600 subscribers. Just really quickly at the end here. Oh, I just can't believe it. So thank you so much to everybody who subscribed and people who comment. I just love responding to your comments. I say this like all the time, but I really do. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.